Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a really fascinating and honestly kind of heavy stack of sources on the desk today.
Yeah, this one's a big one.
We're looking at the classified post-mortem of Operation Caracas. But before you think this is just another recount of a military raid, the helicopters, the breaching charges, all the Hollywood stuff.
Right.
We're actually doing something a little different. We aren't looking at the bang, we're looking at the silence before the noise.
Which is often the most critical part, isn't it? It's the part of history that, gets buried under all the headlines.
Exactly. We are trying to strip away the hindsight bias. You know how it is. We look back at history, especially these risky operations, and we sit in our comfortable chairs and we ask, why on earth did they choose that option?
Right. Why be so aggressive? Or why take that huge risk? It implies that the decision makers were just sitting there with a full menu of options, like they were at a diner.
Yeah, deciding between the soup, the salad, or the steak. And we assume they just ignored the salad, the safe option, and went straight for the spicy steak because they wanted the adrenaline. But looking at this specific analysis, the one titled The Options That Existed, that whole idea of a menu, it's a complete myth.
It really is. And that's the core of what we're unpacking today, the myth of infinite options. When we look at the source material, the question the planners were asking wasn't, what do we want to do?
Yeah.
It was a much darker, much more claustrophobic question.
Which way?
Was what options are actually left standing?
That gives me chills just thinking about it. It reframes the whole situation. You stop seeing them as artists painting on a blank canvas, and you start seeing them as, engineers trying to keep a bridge from collapsing while the supports are snapping one by one.
That is a perfect analogy, because by the time the clock is ticking on an operation like Caracas, choice stops being about preference. It becomes entirely about survivability.
So let's set the stage for you. We're talking about high-level planners, right? Generals, intelligence officers. And the natural assumption is that these people have infinite resources, infinite time, infinite clever ideas.
On paper, sure, yeah. I mean, if you look at the planning documents from 6 months before the event, the list of options was long. You had option A, negotiate. Option B, economic pressure.
Wait and see.
Wait and see. Proxy actions. It looks like a full buffet.
But operational reality is corrosive, isn't it?
Oh, it eats options for breakfast. Most of those alternatives just disappear long before anyone wants to admit it. They collapse because of time, they collapse because of exposure, or they collapse because the enemy simply adapts.
So today we're going to walk through the doors that closed. To understand why the raid happened, we have to understand why everything else didn't happen. And I want to start with the option that I think most of us would gravitate toward in a crisis, the safe option.
Option 1, do nothing.
Yeah, just don't launch, don't escalate. Maintain the status quo. I mean, it feels like the path of least resistance in the corporate world or even in your personal life. That's kind of the default setting. If you don't act, you can't be blamed for the action going wrong.
Exactly. It feels safe because there are no visible fingerprints. But the source material makes a really, really critical point here. It talks about the illusion of neutrality.
The illusion of neutrality. Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, we tend to think that doing nothing is a pause button. We think that if we freeze, the world freezes with us. But in a high-stakes, dynamic environment like Caracas, doing nothing is an active decision with massive kinetic consequences.
Because the other guy isn't pausing.
Precisely. Imagine you're playing a game of tag and you just decide to stand still. The other players are still running. They're flanking you. In this context, while the planners are sitting on their hands, the target is moving. They're hardening defenses. They're burning documents. They're moving assets.
So inaction allows the environment to evolve without you. You're effectively surrendering the initiative.
You are handing the remote control to the other side. You switch from deciding the outcome to just reacting to whatever the enemy does next. And there's another factor the sources highlight here, which is intelligence fidelity.
Right, the idea that information has an expiration date.
It had a half-life. That report you got yesterday about the guard rotation at the compound, it's 50% less likely to be true today. In a week, it's just a guess. So if you choose option 1, do nothing, you're guaranteeing that when you do finally have to act, you'll be doing it blind.
That is a terrifying thought. You think you're buying time, but you're actually spending your intelligence.
Exactly. You're putting for the delay with your eyesight.
Okay, so do nothing is off the table. You lose control, you go blind. What about option 2? This one feels like the responsible professional choice. Delay and reassess.
Yes.
Yes.
The classic, let's circle back on this.
I use that one all the time. Let's gather more intel. Let's wait for better weather. It feels rational. It feels measured. So why does the source material hate this option so much?
Because of the signal-to-noise ratio. The planners in the Caracas files note that delaying to get better clarity is usually a trap. We assume that if we wait, the future will offer us better clarity.
But it doesn't. I mean, if I wait a week, I get more reports, right?
You get more reports, yes. But do they agree with each other? Probably not. In a chaotic environment, delay just brings noise. Now, instead of 2 conflicting reports, you have 20. 3 say the target is in the north building, 2 say he's in the south, 5 say he's left the country, and the rest is just rumors from Twitter.
So you're drowning in data, but starving for wisdom.
That's a great way to put it. And there's a psychological aspect here, too, that the sources really emphasize. Delay signals hesitation. Even if the target in Caracas didn't know exactly what was coming, a raid, a strike, a coup, they can sense the void.
It's like when you walk into a room and 2 people suddenly stop talking. You don't know what they said, but you know the vibe is off.
That is the perfect analogy. The vibe in the city changes. Tension spikes, people go to ground. The source calls this environmental hardening. By waiting for a perfect picture, you've actually changed the picture into something much, much harder to read.
So the safe options, doing nothing and delaying, were actually traps. They sound safe, but they lead straight to failure. Let's move to the indirect options. This is the stuff that usually happens in spy movies, political dramas. Why not just use pressure?
Option 3, indirect pressure. So we're talking legal mechanisms, diplomatic squeezing, financial isolation.
The pen is mightier than the sword approach. Sanctions and scolding. Why wasn't that enough?
The source is very blunt about this. It uses the word saturation.
Saturation,
Yeah.
like a sponge that can't hold any more water.
Exactly. Or think about it like antibiotics. If you overuse them, the bacteria become resistant. In the case of Caracas, this target had been sanctioned, scolded, sued, and isolated for a decade. I mean, the card had already been played.
So doing it again is just...
It's background noise. Repetition dulls impact. Think about a car alarm. The first time you hear it at 3 a.m., you jump out of bed. The 50th time, you put a pillow over your head.
That makes total sense. Whatever shock value those tools had was gone.
Indirect pressure requires surprise to be effective. And by this stage in the operation, nothing about a lawsuit or a sanction would have been surprising. It was just Tuesday. The target had already built their entire economy around the sanctions. They were inoculated.
Okay, so the lawyers and diplomats are out. What about the shadow option? Option 4, proxy action.
This is the one everyone assumes is always on the table. Use local actors. Use third parties. The deniable assets.
Right. Send in someone else, so if it goes wrong, you can just say, whoop, never heard of them. It's the classic move.
The plausible deniability fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the expert analysis in here just tears this apart. In an environment like Caracas, deniability is a fairy tale.
Why a fairy tale? It's worked in history before.
It works until it doesn't. And specifically here, you run into the principal agent problem.
Okay, break that down for us. Principal agent problem.
It's an economic theory, but it applies perfectly to warfare. You are the principal. You want a specific outcome, say the secure extraction of a target. The proxy is the agent. They're doing the actual work. But your incentives rarely align perfectly.
You want the mission done cleanly. They might want what?
Money, revenge, political clout. Or maybe they just want to settle a score with a rival gang that has nothing to do with your objective at all. The analysis shows that the local assets available were, and I'm quoting here, fractured and penetrated.
So you're handing the keys to the car to someone who might just drive it to a chop shop.
Or drive it directly to the police station. When you use your own team, you know their training, their loyalty, their comms discipline. When you use a proxy, you're just introducing variables you cannot control.
And let's be honest about the deniability part. In the age of digital surveillance, leaks, and social media, does anyone actually believe it wasn't us?
No. The source explicitly says, deniability is a depreciating asset.
Yeah.
If American-made weapons show up in a capital city, or if funding is traced back, nobody buys the act. So the planners realized, if we are going to get the blame anyway,
We might as well control the operation.
that's it. It's a chilling calculus. If you're going to take the heat, you need to be the one holding the gun.
So that door is slammed shut too. Now we have one more option before we get to the raid itself, and this one sounds, well, it sounds nice, it sounds elegant. Option 5, extraction without disruption.
The ghost option.
Yeah, a quiet extraction. No explosions, no gunfights. You just slip in, grab the objective, slip out. The neighbors don't even wake up.
It is the ideal scenario. It's what every planner wants. But The expert in me has to point out the flaw.
Right.
It assumes total control.
Control over what?
Everything.
Yeah.
Timing, movement, silence. To pull off a zero-footprint extraction in a hostile city like Caracas, you need to know exactly where every guard is, exactly when every shift change happens, and you need zero surprises.
And based on what we've discussed, the delays, the fading intel, that control was gone.
It was an illusion. The source uses the phrase friction points. Every door you have to open is a friction point. Every street you cross, every darkened window. The probability of maintaining silence through 20 friction points, it approaches zero.
And what happens when the ghost option fails?
That's the danger. If you plan for silence and you get loud, you're in a catastrophe. You have guys equipped for stealth light armor, silencers, small teams. Suddenly they're in a sustained firefight they aren't carrying the ammo for.
So trying to be too perfect is actually a huge risk. You're betting the whole house on a coin flip.
It's the risk of catastrophic failure versus controlled risk. The margin for error was described as razor thin. If one dog barks, the whole plan just evaporates.
Wow. Okay, let's pause here and look at the board. We've crossed off doing nothing. We've crossed off delay. Indirect pressure is useless. Proxies are dangerous. Quiet extraction is basically impossible.
And this brings us to the synthesis, the psychological shift that happens in that room.
What's fascinating here is that all those rejected options, they shared a common weakness.
They did. Every single one depended on conditions, time, visibility, predictability that were already gone.
So the conversation shifts. It stops being which option is best because honestly, none of them are good in the traditional sense.
Right. The core question becomes this darker metric that planners use. Which option fails last?
Which option fails last? That is grim, but also very clarifying.
It cuts through the noise. We aren't looking for perfection anymore. We're looking for containment. In game theory, this is the minimax solution. You're trying to minimize your maximum possible loss.
Loss of access, loss of leverage.
Loss of credibility. If they back down, they lose their position. If they waited, they lose the window of opportunity.
So let's talk about the raid. The option they actually took, Operation Caracas. Why did it survive when everything else died?
It wasn't because it was flawless. Let's be very clear about that. The raid was fraught with danger. Helicopters crash. People die.
Yeah.
But the raid offered the one thing the other options didn't. Not certainty of outcome, but certainty of process.
Help us understand that distinction. Certainty of process.
Well, you can never guarantee the outcome that you get the target and get out safely.
Yeah.
But with a direct raid, you control the inputs. You decide when the helicopters launch. You decide the route. You decide the rules of engagement.
Versus the delay option where you're waiting on the enemy, or the proxy option where you're waiting on a middleman?
Exactly. A direct action reclaims agency. It takes the timeline back from the enemy. The risks of a raid could be mapped. You can simulate a firefight. You can plan for casualties. You can map the route.
Versus the undefined, slow, creeping risks of waiting.
Precisely. A direct action carries risks you can see. Waiting carries risks you can't. And when you are backed into a corner, you choose the devil you know.
The source puts it beautifully. The raid was the last remaining move on a board that had already lost most of its pieces.
And that is why, when we look back, we shouldn't ask, was this impulsive? It wasn't impulsive at all. It was inevitable.
It's a terrifying kind of logic, isn't it? It strips away all the romance of high-level strategy and reveals it as just hanging on.
That's the reality of crisis management. We want our leaders to be playing 3D chess, thinking 10 moves ahead. But sometimes they're just trying to keep the king from getting mated for one more turn. They're looking at 5 bad options and picking the one that keeps them in the game.
It really changes how I look at these headlines now. When you see a government or a military do something that looks rash or extreme, you have to wonder what doors closed behind them.
You have to look at the invisible architecture of the decision. It stops the decision from looking like a mistake and reveals it as the only path that was left.
So let's bring this down to earth. What does this all mean for us? For you listening who isn't planning a raid on Caracas, but is maybe looking at a failing project at work or a crisis in the family?
I think the big takeaway is about how we judge decisions, whether it's in history or even in our own lives. When we see a decision or when we have to make a decision that feels forced, we need to stop looking for the perfect choice.
Because the perfect choice probably died 3 moves ago.
Exactly. If you're waiting for a perfect option, you're probably just engaging in option 2, delay. And as we just learned, delay has a cost.
The do-nothing tax.
Right. Time steals your choices. So if you're facing a hard problem, ask yourself, am I letting the environment harden against me? Am I losing the initiative? Sometimes, taking the risky action is actually safer than waiting, because at least you're the one driving the car.
That is such a powerful mindset shift. It's about assessing the silence, looking at why you can't do the other things.
Understanding a decision often requires looking at why every other door closed.
Yeah.
It brings a lot of clarity to the chaos.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Just because it was the only option doesn't mean it was a good option, or that it would even work.
Oh, absolutely not. That is the terrifying part of the Minimax solution. You can go through this whole logical process, eliminate all the bad options, pick the inevitable path, and still fail catastrophically.
The logic holds, but the helicopter can still malfunction.
Choosing an option doesn't mean you can execute it perfectly. Just because you have to jump off the burning building doesn't mean you'll land safely.
Every option carries its own failure scenarios.
And that is the lingering question planners ask right before they give the go order. They look at that last remaining option, the one they've justified with all this logic, and they ask, what happens if this goes wrong?
And that is a whole other level of nightmare.
It is. And it's actually where we're going next.
That's right. The source material teases the next discussion, episode 4, which is all about the imagination of failure.
Because before the raid even launched, failure was already being imagined in vivid detail. They were running pre-mortems.
We're gonna dive into that darkness next time. It's the flip side of the coin.
Yeah.
Today was about how they chose the path. Next time, we talk about how they prepared for the crash.
It gets darker before it gets brighter. But that's why we do this.
Exactly. For now, take a look at the decisions in front of you. Are you choosing what you want? Or are you choosing the only thing left?
Deep thoughts for a Tuesday.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.